Hey guys, Launchpad Podcast here. You know the business. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at LaunchpadPod. On our website, launchpadpod.com. Check us out on YouTube. We're really good-looking, handsome podcasters. God damn, I'm looking at us in Zoom windows right now.
Strength for that. Yeah, we're really good-looking.
Or maybe I was just floored by how good-looking we are, and I'm just like...
I like to keep saying we instead of me.
I mean, me would be me, but I lump us both in handsome.
Yeah, you think you consider yourself a handsome fellow?
Oh,
I think you're handsome.
Handsome boy. Fuck yeah, dude. Look at this beard. I got the hair rocking. It doesn't help that it's like enforced a lot. Like a lot of people like reinforce that opinion. So
that you're handsome?
Yeah. Yeah.
But do they say it's beard based? Because you're making it sound like it's beard based.
But beard and hair. The long hair, which I have it up right now, but you know.
Oh yeah, up it looks stupid as shit, but down you actually look really attractive.
Matt hates a ponytail. Matt hates
well,
the buns.
on a douchebag, yeah, but if it like hot chicks can wear ponytails, it looks good.
Nah, I rock a man bun, dude. You don't even know.
If you shaved your face, do you not think you'd look as cute?
I'd look younger, but you know, I like the jaw. You know, I like the beard. I think it
looks good, and you rock a good beard too.
I rock a good beard. You know, it's gnarly beard and long hair. It's fucking great. Anyway, let's talk about some comic books.
Yeah, our topic today is how handsome Aaron is.
You guys used to.
It's gonna be a short episode.
Spider-Man. Let's get on with the show.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
All right, welcome to the Launchpad Podcast. I'm Aaron.
Matt.
Matt, we're doing. You know, we haven't just sat down and talked about some movies in a while. We've had some
been
themes,
busy. We've had an
guests.
agenda lately,
Yeah.
huh? We've had a lot of people on, big people, small people. My dad.
Yeah,
We've had a lot of topics that we've been meaning to get to that like we did some research and like worked on. Today's just been more of like a kickback. What have you been doing? What have you been up to? What have you been reading? What have you been watching?
Yeah, man. Well, Kate and I have been on a 90s kick. Now, let me explain this because, we were born in the 80s, but grew up in the 90s. But a lot of 90s cinema, we were too young to see. And then when we were old enough to like study film, like when I went to film school, they weren't talking about 90s movies. Like the
That's
80s,
fair, yeah.
The 80s were just dipping into film schools. Like, okay, we can talk about the 80s now. Like literally this past year, Turner Classic Movies had like some 80s films on their list and people are like, Scandalo. And it's like, guys, they're good movies. Like how old does a movie have to be before it can be considered
before you can be considered a classic? Yeah, what year were you born?
84.
Okay. So I'm 82. So you're like my sister's age. You're 2 years younger.
Right. But I'm sure the same goes for you. There's a lot of cinema in the 90s where you're like, I don't give a shit about Hackers and nobody's going to tell you that Hackers is good.
Sure.
But you watch Hackers and you're like, wow, this is so tragically 90s and MTV, but it's actually really a lot of fun. Not a good movie, but like a slice of the 90s. Because here's what's happening in the 90s. MTV has come out, so everything's like going like a million miles a minute, zipping at you, super in your face. The music's pumping. Quentin Tarantino's still working at a video store, and he's writing Natural Born Killers and True Romance and shit, trying to sell movies. So like cinema hasn't changed for a long time, and then suddenly the 90s hits and it's all like dan, 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 dan. They get the like techno beat up in their soul. So like we watched Hackers, which was wild.
Yeah.
Dusk Till Dawn, Cliffhanger, The Matrix, Office Space, Matinee, Natural Born Killers, Last Action Hero.
Matinee with John Goodman?
Yeah, 1993. I had never seen it.
I saw it when it came out on video, and I remember wanting to see it because it had a giant praying mantis in it.
Yeah.
Turns out that's not really the focus of the movie.
No. But it's funny because Matinee, it's about this guy who tries to come up with like goofy gimmicks for movies during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Like literally the Cuban Missile Crisis is happening during the movie and everybody is afraid that they're going to die, which from a movie standpoint, that being the backdrop was very interesting and pretty cool. It's a cool movie, and they do fun, goofy gimmick, 3D and rumblers in your seat and sprays and smell-o-vision. It's basically the movie Popcorn, but nobody's getting murdered.
So like a lesser Popcorn?
Yeah. Popcorn's a weird movie too, because it was filmed in Jamaica. So everyone in the audience is Jamaican, but the main stars are like, we're at our New York film school.
Good thing we're in America.
Yeah, and everybody's like, this movie sucks, man. And you're like, what? Why is everybody in this movie but the main character is Jamaican? Really goofy. But yeah, we watched a shit ton of movies. It was wild. And, you know, I don't know. How do you feel about Natural Born Killers? Let's start there.
Well, okay. So Natural Born Killers, I could do 2 episodes on that because it was a formative movie for me for a lot of reasons. Number one, and we've talked about this on the podcast a couple times, my parents were very much like, what movie do you want to watch? Oh, a rated R horror movie? Okay. And they let me watch a lot of stuff. Pulp Fiction and Natural Born Killers were the 2 movies that and I was in high school for both of them, that they said I can't watch. So naturally, being in high school, and my parents and I were having a lot of drama at the time anyway, naturally in high school, I was like, I will stop at nothing to not only watch those movies, but to own them. And I think they're both great. Natural Born Killers is really interesting. So for me, it has a nostalgic value, even if it was shitty. I don't think it is. But even if it was shitty, it was important to me at the time because it was like a rebellion thing where I was like, fuck my parents, I'm going to watch this. It was such an, I mean, it's not an angry movie, but it's about angry characters. So as a teenager, I can relate to it.
It's a pretty damn angry movie.
Well, it's a violent movie, but I don't think it's about anger. It's about how our nation and the media glorifies a lot of shit that it shouldn't be glorifying. And the movie itself glorifies those characters.
Well, and I think it's one of those movies that says, hey guys, don't glorify violence by glorifying violence.
Watch how fucking cool this is.
How fucking cool. So like, I think to teenagers, you're like, fuck yeah. But like as an adult, you kind of get the nuance of like, well, it's trying to say it, but I don't think it's doing a great job of being like, this is bad. Because I think at the same time, it's like, fucking cool. These guys are killing everybody. I think the movie's wild. The first time I ever saw it, I was in college. Because again, too young to ever see it. In high school, older kids were like, I love this movie, man. And it's so punk. Like, it really is punk rock. It's the thing your parents don't want you to see.
Yeah. I mean, it literally was that for me, right?
Exactly. I saw it in college, and I thought it was garbage. I thought it was garbage. Just steaming garbage. Like, it's frantic. It's, again, cut like a music video. It's just doing all this weird, wild styles. This was the, and I had only seen it the one time. So then I watched it now, and I watched it with Kate, and she's like, you know what? I see what they're trying to do, and I respect that they're trying to capture the 90s in a style. They're trying to do what they're trying to do with the violence and the idea, but it's a weird movie, and I think it will always have its place because of what it is. It's like a punk rock song. And maybe that's the thing. Like, punk rock isn't about the quality of the music. A lot of punk rock music is admittedly garbage.
Sure.
But we're here to rebel, and we're here to have a good time, and we're here to break things. So that movie, I think, was like, I'm going to try and throw all the shit at the walls and see what sticks, see what blows up, what blood stays, and they just killed everybody. It's so frenetic. It's kind of bizarre. It's wild.
I like your idea about like, we're just going to do what we're going to do and break things, because I do feel that's how it is. And when I first saw that, I was just starting to like study film. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, not just watch a movie and say, I like it, but I was reading about specific films, but about film in general. And when you watch that, there's so many different pieces that don't necessarily fit with the other ones. Like the first scene, they're in a diner and he ends up shooting at a waitress, and you're almost like an over the shoulder of the spinning bullet POV. And it like stops right in front of her for a second and then kills her. And it's like, why was that a choice? Right.
Yeah.
And then like later on, when you do the flashback to when Mickey, rescues Mallory from her family and her abusive father and stuff.
Played
it's
by
like
Rodney
this
Dangerfield.
Yeah, but it's like this weird sitcom thing, right? And you do all these different things. There's a lot of interesting music choices and lighting choices and camera choices. I believe he shot on multiple types of stocks.
Yeah.
A lot of rear screen projection
16
and stuff.
different types of film.
And it's like, I think as a kid who was in love with film, right? Like I still am, but then it was like this beautiful film, not Natural Born Killers per se, but film was like this beautiful thing that I was just starting to learn about and understand that like your choice in camera angle influences how I interpret a scene, I as the audience, right? And watching that on that movie, I think there was a lot of examples where it was like, this is how, like, he's using a gel on this light for a reason.
Yeah.
The rear screen projection is for a reason. And I thought that was so cool and so interesting. And the fact that it was so far from the normal conventions, you know what I mean? Any other director at the time, including Tarantino, were to make that movie. I know Tarantino like wrote and produced it, but if he directed it, it would be made differently. And I feel like it was an interesting art piece at the time. I know I'm putting words to what my teenage mind liked back then, but I think that's how I felt about it.
Because here's another good example is like I saw Devil's Rejects. I can't remember if I saw it in high school or in college. Whenever it came out, I saw it, and I loved that movie. And it's basically the same movie, but not as MTV, man.
Sure, yeah, I think that's
right. And I think just the style was very arresting to me. And if this was the first time I think I respected it, is like, oh, I see where it came from. I see the importance of why that is like raw 90s on film stock. And it's an intense thing. I think, I don't think that level of violence, certainly I think in the wrong viewer is going to glorify it. People will see
absolutely.
That, like, because people who say that you can't be affected by movies or like violent video games aren't harmful, that's bullshit. It's just also, what are you going to do about it? It's most people are fine. So is this one idiot gonna? But like, I think there's a lot of kids who watch that movie and are like, "Fuck yeah!"
But I think, like you said, you could make that argument about The Matrix. You could make that argument about Gladiator. You could make that argument about, dude, no joke. Kent hit me with a metal pot the other day and said, "Not the mama." And I was like, that's hysterical. You're not allowed to do that though. You know, like, but I also think like I have a parental responsibility to describe to my son that is fake. Yeah. That is on TV. It's silly on TV, but we don't do that in real life because it can hurt. And he clearly thinks that that's a funny thing. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He thought it was funny to emulate the baby in dinosaurs.
That's
and I was like, first of all, what a reference to pull, because we hadn't watched the show in weeks. And he remembered it. But yeah, no, now next he'll be burning Barney because he saw it on Beavis and Butthead. But at least I'm culturing my kid by making him watch cool shit.
But I don't think anybody has the context ready for Natural Born Killers. I think it just rocks your world and makes you it's either going to amp you up like a fucking rock song, like I said, punk rock, or repel you.
Sure, and I can. It's one of those movies that I understand. Like, I understand why moms groups didn't like it. I understand why religious groups didn't like it. I understand why people didn't like it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but it'd be interesting to test this theory again. But I feel like if you made that movie today, whether it was the same movie or something similar, pretty much no matter who you got to play, and I think the movie Joker is a good example. Yeah. Whoever played it would just relish the role of being crazy so hard that it would ruin it for me. And I don't remember the last actor I saw in a movie that was crazy and effective. I think right now, and a Joker again is just the first example, and it's a great example.
What about the Joker that was good? The Dark Knight Joker was
good too.
Yeah.
But I feel like that was good. He did a good job. He played crazy and he leaned into it, but he leaned into it as part of the character. I feel like Joaquin Phoenix and Joker did a good job, but it was like the portrayal itself, in my opinion, was self-indulgent to the point where it wasn't as good to me. I think if it was dialed back just a bit, it would have been more enjoyable. And I feel like I've seen so many movies lately, both shitty and good, where the actor/directors are just like, all right, you're crazy. and they're like, well, I'm crazy.
The Jared Leto Joker was crazy like that.
But like I think that was written that way. But I feel like if you were to make a movie right now about two star-crossed lovers who were murderers, serial killers that got glorified, it would be so extremely portrayed. Whereas I feel like Juliette Lewis and Woody Harrelson are so effective in that movie. They are fucking scary, I think, because at any given moment, they're just killing a room full of people for literally no reason. And I feel like they don't do such a over the top job of portraying those characters that in the movie, it makes it credible and it makes it scary for me.
I will say this, though. They are that over the top. The movie out over the tops them. So they seem normal compared to like, so, you know, you got Woody Harrelson being like, I'm crazy, dudes. Well, the whole thing is he's the cool killer and she's the one who gets kind of hot under the collar. Like she'll get amped up and, you know, start stabbing guys over a jukebox.
Sure.
But like the movie is so dialed up around them to like not even 11. We're talking this movie's dialed up to 20 with all the weird camera shit and stuff. So they do seem relatively calm and normal. When I think if you remove the noise of the movie, they'd be very over the top and weird too.
Interesting.
It's wild. And you have Robert Downey Jr. as an Australian. Super weird. Tommy Lee Jones is in there. Like, it's just full of wild cameos. It's a bizarre movie, man. It's fun to check out, but again...
Oh, Tommy Lee Jones. Fuck, I completely forgot about it. He's the warden, right?
He's the warden, yeah. Filmed at a real prison, and they had to lock it down because it incited a riot that everybody was so amped up about the movie. So it's just like, oh my God, crazy. It's a crazy movie, and Oliver Stone's one of those crazy directors to do that, but you're right. If they did it today, I mean, again, I don't think there's anything like it that's this
that's interesting.
Amped up.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what I would think.
Maybe Crank 2 is this amped up, but not as mean.
Because it's got like an aura and an energy to it. Like the movie creates that in the audience. You could tell it was probably, like you said, if there's a fucking riot, but it felt like that. It was probably that way on set. Like it was probably not the most comfortable movie to work on at times, right? I think some of those scenes to shoot would have been fucking just intense. You ever, like, you've been on movies. I've been on movies where people are being, like in the movie, are being tortured. And sometimes it's just stupid and over the top and fake. But sometimes, like, you can feel the energy of the actors, both the torturer and the torturee, where it almost is uncomfortable. I would imagine Natural Born Killers would have been a lot of
very uncomfortable. Well, there's a scene where they walk through a bunch of rattlesnakes and they're like, oh, we just shot it at night, so it was cold, and they weren't as active. And it was like, you're watching this scene and snakes are like biting at their boots. And you're just like, that would have been a very intense scene to like film around. Holy shit. I can't imagine. Then
they have to go, they break into a farm, or they go to a pharmacy that has some giant weird mural on the wall and everything is green. Neon green lit.
Yes.
Yeah. Like to me, like as a kid watching that, I was like, why would a pharmacy look like that? And I understood that they made that choice cinematically. Yeah. And I thought that was so cool to study that art to me. And it was so much to study in one movie.
But now
it was like glorifying violence.
Yeah, it glorified violence. Nowadays, if you did it, people would be like, party jails, what a loser. Like, what is this? What is this film school crap? But that's the thing. It inspired so many, like, I mean, Pulp Fiction and this movie, like Quentin Tarantino's early oeuvre inspired so many filmmakers.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
The early aughts and the late 90s. And literally everybody was obsessed with that in college. I mean, Boondock Saints to a lesser degree, but like they all glorified the fuck out of violence and made it really cool. It's bananas.
Well, it's interesting because you could it would be fun to do an episode or a discussion about like glorified and or verse stylized, right? Because I feel like you said Boondock Saints and you take Natural Born Killers, both of them do glorify violence. I think almost every action movie does, but they also are very stylized violence. You know what I mean? Natural Born Killers is an uncomfortable style. Boondock Saints is like fun, right? Nobody worries that he fucking shoots the cat. Nobody worries about any of the murders in that because they're vigilantes and it looks fucking cool.
Yeah.
You know?
What I mean, and again, it's completely down to that tone. Natural Born Killers is mean from the beginning to end.
Sure. Yeah.
It's mean. And I think Boondock Saints has a lot of fun.
You're supposed to be like, I am uncomfortable by this. And you're supposed to be like, this is fucking real. Like, when there's a serial killer or a school shooting or something like that, it becomes this phenomena a media phenomena where it becomes, it's not even what you're watching and learning and interested in is not even what was happening. It's the the surrounding situations,
the circus. Yeah. And it feels that way. And it's interesting because we watched a movie just for funsies. We watched Kung Fu Hustle was one. It's not really a 90s movie, but we watched it. It was fun. And like that movie's super violent, but it's basically a live action cartoon Kung Fu movie.
Right.
So like how is that line? How do you find that? And it's all in tone, it's all in tone.
Yeah.
And the Matrix.
Consequences, right? I think if you don't see consequences in a movie, it's not as big a deal, right?
Sure. And that's the weird thing about Natural Born Killers is you see a lot of consequences, but then they outskirt them and kill everybody anyway.
Right.
Which is fucking wild. What a fucking wild movie. So yeah, big 90s.
What else is on your list? You said Hackers. Hackers I saw for the first time maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I just missed, I was old enough, but I missed it somehow.
Again,
it's fun. It's like you said, it's fun. If someone was like, let's have a 90s movie night, everyone bring a movie, I could see that being on the table, no problem. It encompasses the 90s in multiple things. It's a fun one of those, like, it's almost like The Outsiders of the 90s, where you're like, where did this actor's career go? Where did this actress become from that?
Huge, all these big names, people, all these interesting characters, and they. The thing I liked about that is it had all these super unnecessary like camera tricks for people hacking. So they're like, we got to hack the system. They all start typing, and they all have like their own little computers, and they're plugging them into phones because I guess that's how you did it. And you're like, hackety. And they would do this shot where like they're in a phone booth, and the phone booth is spinning, and the world around them is standing still. And that's like they built a phone booth on a Lazy Susan, and the camera's attached to it, so it would spin around them, and everybody in the train station's walking around them in a different direction. So it's like very cool, but how unnecessary for a hack moment. And then like when they go inside the computer, literally somebody built a miniature city out of like computer parts, so it looked like they were like flying through a city aerial view, but it's not CGI. This is the 90s, so somebody built a city out of computer parts. Yeah. And you're just like, that's a lot of effort for hackety hack like, and the language in it, I love it because they're like, we've bypassed the second security mainframe on the and they're coming back at us, and you see all these like goofy ass graphics, and the people who are being hacked are like, we have to circumvent them and go through the mainframe backside. It's just so goofy, but I loved it. It was fun,
Well, you bring up an interesting point about that city having been made, because the 90s as a decade, right, is pretty much, and not to say that computers and visual optical effects weren't in place, because they certainly were, but like the 90s were the last time where when you saw something, you could be reasonably sure it existed. Yeah. It was real. Someone made that. And 100%. There's a ton of movies that you could watch, especially fantasy, sci-fi stuff, and a little bit of horror, where you're like, whatever I just saw, that happened. They made that. That was a real thing. And some of it looks great. Some of it doesn't look good. Some of it, you see what they were attempting, and I think through the lens of time, it looks bad. But in the 90s, nobody cared, or nobody would have shat on it then, because it was all you had. But it's almost like what you said about Tarantino and I forget who else you said. Kevin Smith, but I don't know if you said him. But like those guys were making movies then, and I think you and I, being a generation behind them, were like, we can do this. We can make movies. We can work on movies. When you see a zombie movie and you see like a bitchin' machete effect, you know that they did that on the day. It's fucking exciting. You know what I mean? Even if you don't want to make zombies for a living, even if you don't want to work in film for a living, it's cool to think that they did that. Now, I think when you watch something amazing, you don't have that, how do you do that feeling, because you know how they did it. It was probably computers, which means nobody's, I think we're not thinking that anymore, right?
Right. I don't look at Thanos and go, man, what an awesome suit.
Right. Someone did that. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
It's there, beep, bop, boop. And I know that's a shit ton of work. Motion capture, animation, modeling, texturing, lighting. That's a fuck ton of work, and it takes a lot of people. But there's something about that. And then when you see Tim Curry in I Am Legend with those horns, and you're like, That's
Not
a
I Am
costume.
Legend.
Yeah. You see him as the devil in Legend with the giant horns and the whole costume. And you're like, holy
He was like
shit.
that on the day. Yeah.
That is a costume. That is a monster. Holy cow. And that's difficult. But there's 2 movies that come out in the 90s that change all of it. And it is Jurassic Park 1993 and The Matrix 1999. And after that, nothing is the same. Jurassic Park and The Matrix changed the game because people suddenly were like, oh, computers are a tool. And The Matrix made like action style. People ripped that shit off for the next decade. And Jurassic Park proved that you could create a CG animated creature and have it be believable. And then from that point on, people were like, we're doing that. Let's do that. That worked. Jurassic Park did it. And they're like, what? That's ILM. They've been doing it since the 70s.
That wasn't you, jackass. That was ILM.
Yeah, ILM's been working on that shit since the 70s. And the fact that they were able to pull out, so like you suddenly get a rash of crap CGI.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, like horror movies, like I keep going back to The Faculty, which not a bad movie. It's actually a really good movie, but the CGI in it is atrocious.
But, you know, it's like what you had at the time. It was the best you could afford / some of the technology, like the best technology at the time was not necessarily that much better. Jurassic Park was great, but Jurassic Park was also made by one of, I would say, the best filmmakers in history, but certainly the best filmmakers of like our time, right? Spielberg is one of the best filmmakers. Think of how much practical shit they used. They used the CG when they needed it, when they couldn't do anything else. That was the best way to do it.
Still had a 3-story tall T-Rex. Yeah. Right. You still built the T-Rex, and the T-Rex still did shit. And then, you know, and then they had to work hard to blend the real and the fake and make it work. And I don't think people put that level of care anymore.
And like I said, that goes back to my point where when you watch Jurassic Park, there are scenes where you're like, I think that was a practical raptor head that they had on set. And there's another one where you're like, that's a guy in legs. And there's another one where you're like, I think that was a CG, but it might have been a puppet. But you're not really sure. Or at least you have a wonder. And I think that wonder creates wonder and enjoyment. Whereas now, like when you said Thanos, how many characters are like from the shoulders down or from, you know, from the cowl out are a makeup, but the face is CGI. But because the face is CGI, I think our minds inadvertently kind of write it all off as like, oh, that's CGI. And you're not even thinking about the costumer who did that fucking art. You know, I guess the lab guys who made the armor, the costumer who put the armor on somebody. You just write the whole thing off as like, oh, it's, you know, that character was CGI, even when there's practical elements that really have a lot of work going into them.
And then you just see a picture of Robert Downey Jr. in the gray pajamas with tracking marks all over, and they're like, oh, Iron Man CGI. But it's like, no, Stan Winston Studios built a suit of armor. Right. And yes, there is quite a bit of CGI when he's flying, when he's doing this, and like when he's landing and transforming, and they do it all the time. They just replace the costume, but somebody still has to design that and build that. You know, and CGI definitely, when I saw Blade 2 16 times, that movie put the wonder of CGI in my mind. How did they make those vampires turn into fire and dust and crumble? Like that blew my mind. And I wanted to figure out how they did that. I mean, that was really what set me off on like keeping digital in my back pocket as something to come back to later. But I think now it's so omnipresent that, you know, it, like you said, we just assume that it's fake and move on.
And it also kind of sucks for that too. Like we're crazy off topic, but like even shitty CGI, a lot of work went into that. A lot of people worked hard to do stuff. And if CGI, I think at least our generation and older would rather see practical stuff than CGI, whether it works or not. I don't know about kids younger than us because maybe they grew up with CGI. But I think that if you and I watch, let's say, a dinosaur movie that has a not super, super amazing puppet in it, we will forgive that faster than if it has not great CGI. I think we condemn that a lot harder, a lot faster because of our generation.
When I worked for the Kyoto brothers, one of the Ed Kyoto told me, he says, look, it doesn't matter how shitty the puppet looks, your mind knows it's real. And no matter how good the CGI looks, your mind knows it's fake.
And I think that's true. And I think we really shit on CGI hard when it's bad, or even when it's not good, even if it's not bad, like not Blade 1 bad, you know, it's like not good. But like, even those things a bunch of people worked on that, worked really hard, put a lot of work. And just to get that to that level took so much work.
Yep.
But it's kind of hard because CGI, maybe because good CGI looks so good that like anything less than that, your mind is automatically like, stupid.
Well,
suspension of disbelief ruined.
I guess it's because here's a hypothesis. There's no reason in a lot of people's minds for CGI to be shitty. You have a computer. It's unlimited resources.
Right.
You don't have the time. Like a puppet costs money, and a puppet you have to sculpt, and a puppet you have to build. I can understand why a puppet might be shitty. I couldn't build a puppet, but people just assume that a computer should be perfect. And I think computers are expected to be perfect, which is ridiculous because even if I'm not doing CGI, I'm just doing a spreadsheet. My computer's a piece of shit. So, like, I mean, come on, let's give us some credit here. But I don't think people realize you're still doing the exact same things you would do if it was practical. You're just in a digital space.
Right, working a computer.
Like, somebody still has to sculpt the monster.
Right. You don't just type the word dinosaur on the computer and it spits out Jurassic Park. Like you got to fucking make things, different angles. You got to make structure. Like for the dinosaur, you got to make a skeleton, right? You got to make an armature inside. You got to put a skin over it. You have to color and texture that skin. You have to light that skin. You have to
hand animate it. You have to animate it. And, you know, yes, the computer can help you. There's motion tracking. You can have a person act like a dinosaur and they're walking through, and then you can animate it like an old cartoon, but in 3D. There's so many ways to do it, but I think people expect perfection because, again, there is no reason it shouldn't look amazing if you're using a computer. True, but at the same time, unfair because a lot goes into it. Time, budget, those things really affect how good CG can be. And here's like a weird example. You know, the Princess Leia and the Grand Moff Tarkin from Rogue One, so close to being perfect. So close to being good, but some sort of weird uncanny valley shit that just didn't fucking work. And all it takes is one producer to be like, I don't think her nose looks like that. And like somebody who's like, we literally scanned her face from every frame of every movie she was in and built a digital representation. And you're telling me you don't think that's right, so we're changing it to look different. That sucks. And like that's the kind of shit that can happen. It takes one person to just make one note and then it's in the garbage. Did you see Ghostbusters yet?
No. Okay,
I won't spoil it, but they do. They do some of the best.
Princess Leia's there.
Princess Leia I've ever seen. Yeah, they do the best posthumous CGI I've ever seen. It's amazing.
That would be cool as shit. As if the end of the movie, Yoda and Obi-Wan and Leia appear as Jedi ghosts, and then they're like,
I'd dig it. Yeah, Ghostbusters was awesome. They did a great job.
Good. I heard it was good. I'll get there.
Yeah.
All right. So 90s movies, 90s kicks. I'll have to think now. What are some good 90s movies to throw your way if you haven't seen them? I thought you were going to say shit like Clueless and Can't Hardly Wait.
I watch Clueless too. I mean, it's fun. It's stupid.
Clueless. Yeah, it is what it is. I remember seeing that in theaters because that was like when Alicia Silverstone was like hot.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it a couple years ago. Now, a couple of years ago, I had already seen it multiple times. I had been through film school. I'm a grown man. I'm watching it with Amanda, and she, dead serious, turns to me and explains the irony of the title to me. And I'm like, I get it.
That's hilarious.
It's called Clueless. I was like, I get it.
I mean, another one with 10 Things I Hate About You. It's like, it's not my genre, but it's a completely entertaining film. No problem there. I enjoyed it.
I agree.
Yeah, we watched a bunch of them. Cliffhanger, stupid fun,
I watched that one recently. That's just like, that's an unsung one. It's almost like Commando. Like when you say like, what's the best Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? There's so many A-lists that you think about.
It's so hard.
Commando has never gotten the recognition that Terminator or Terminator 2 or Predator has. Yep. But like that is, if you said I can only watch one, stereotypical action movie, I think I'd point you towards Commando because it has everything.
It's also because I don't think it's like a top tier, like blockbuster action film. It fits better in the VHS 80s action.
Sure. I think, you're right. It's got that vintage idea about it. Whereas
Yes.
watch Terminator, even Terminator 1 is a little too polished, kind of.
Yeah, and they're glossy
Yeah.
as shit. And like, you know, I love Total Recall so much. One of my favorite sci-fi Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. But like, where does that fit in his oeuvre other than being fucking awesome? Commando, if somebody's like, I want to watch an 80s action film that has big guns and big muscles, Commando hits every note.
It really does. It's, I mean, he's shirtless or sleeveless, at least for a while. It has some of the funniest / dumbest quips in it.
Yeah.
Like across the board. He can't say half of them, which just makes it even better. It's got great action, super violence for sometimes no real reason.
Him
crazy bullshit in a mall, jumping and swinging on a mall.
Flinging the blades around. The same mall that they filmed fucking Chopping Mall in. Yes, I love
that woman
Mall.
fucking pulls out a rocket launcher and shoots it the wrong way, blows up a car, like in the middle of a street. Come on, like what doesn't it have?
Commando's great. Fucking great. And like, again, not his best, but I don't think you can get much better for like a VHS era, big guns, big muscles, 80s action movie. Fucking
But that
awesome.
said, I think Cliffhanger is in a similar category because I watched it recently.
Yes.
And it's way better than I remember it being. And it's one of those things that it's like, again, Stallone, I don't think ever hit Schwarzenegger's high watermark. But when you say top 5 Stallone movies, Cliffhanger's probably not on most people's. Cliffhanger is fucking great. He does a fine job. It's certainly not Shakespeare, but
And
it's
I love,
for a 90s action movie. It's fun as shit.
Fun as shit. And I love Michael Rooker as his like buddy in it, as a good guy. Normally, like to me, Michael Rooker is like, you know, Walking Dead,
Creeper.
and Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Yeah, he's a creepy guy. Slither.
Yeah, Slither. He always plays this. You know, he does a great job at it. You know, in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. But this is like he's a good guy and he's the buddy and like. It's fun. What a fun movie. Cliffhanger was great.
And it's also one of those things. It's like when you set a horror movie on an airplane, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you don't do it great, because now you're stuck in an airplane for the whole movie. When you set an action movie in the fucking Alps on these mountains or whatever, if that doesn't work, if your action movie doesn't work there, it just feels weird. But that movie's great. They have some great sequences in and around these caves and mountains and fucking helicopters,
glaciers,
and ladders. Yeah, it's fucking cool.
Here's something I will say about watching all these 90s movies. Because, you know, you grow up in that era and actors come up with you. There are so many. Who the fuck is that guy? I recognize that guy. Who is that fucking guy? Yeah. That guy. He's in a thing, but what movie? Who is that guy from that stuff? And Cliffhanger had that moment where one of these like, yo, bro, Tubular, let's catch some pow pow nar.
Random snowboarders, skiers that like get involved.
One of them, who the blonde one with the long hair, I was like, who is that fucking dude? Why can't I remember what he's in? And I finally realized he's one of the bullies in Hocus Pocus. Again, just some random ass shit from the 90s that you're like,
Did you look him up?
I had to.
And that was where you recognized him from, the Hocus Pocus bully?
The Hocus Pocus bully. And you know what else he's in? Falling Down. He's in the McDonald's when they're like, again.
It must have been a non-speaking role for that one.
Yeah, no. He's literally just at one point goes, so goofy.
Yeah,
so
that
goofy,
movie,
man.
that Cliffhanger is a lot of fun. If you guys haven't seen Cliffhanger in a while, it is worth going back and checking out. It is fun.
We still have a little bit of time. I do want to put on your radar. I have a Christmas movie I want to talk about before we finish. So let me know if you still want to talk 90s movies. Do you have any movies you watch, Matt?
Oh, well, actually, I just watched one the other night. I watched two the other night that I would talk about. Horror. Nice. 1976, Alice, Sweet Alice. Have you seen that one?
The creepy girl in the rainbow with the creepy mask.
Yeah.
Pretty
That's
good.
one of those movies that this is at least the fourth time I've watched it. And I never kind of remember it. And then I'll always be like, I haven't watched that in a while. Let me throw it back in. And if you guys haven't seen Alice, Sweet Alice, it's about two sisters. One of them is played by Brooke Shields. One of them is played by another girl who looks familiar. Let me see if I know who she is. But the Brooke Shields sister is like the beautiful young sister who is like a great girl. Everybody loves her. She's having her communion and she's murdered in the church. She's burned to death, choked and burned to death in this little box.
Yeah, it's gnarly. It's pretty gnarly of a murder. It's not very graphic, but
You don't see it, but then
it's
like
gnarly.
someone looks in and like it's like almost like a toy box in the church, and they open it and you don't see inside, but all this fucking smoke billows out. I think you do see a burned corpse at one point, but it's tastefully done, but it makes it more brutal feeling. And everybody thinks it's her sister because they have this raincoat and this like creepy little woman mask, like one of those like very translucent but like almost opaque mask that has makeup on it, and it totally hides your face. Everyone thinks it's this creepy sister who has been treating her shitty for the beginning of the movie, and we've heard this sister is up to nonsense, Alice. So Alice kills, I think the other sister's name was Karen, and there's like the police are looking into it, the police are blaming her, all this other creepy shit. There's an aunt that's blaming her. Why wasn't she sitting with us during the communion? Where was she? And then more attacks happened by this little girl in the trench coat, or not a trench coat, a yellow raincoat. And it's a murder mystery. Like as the movie goes on, there's different things that happen that make it look like it's the girl, but also she's saying it wasn't her. She finally takes the lie detector test and says it was the dead sister who was doing it. And the lie detector comes back truthful. So you're like, well, what is going on here now? And it's a really good movie. And if you haven't seen it, pause it because I'll spoil it in a second, but don't listen if you don't want it spoiled. Do you remember what the ending is?
It was like their nanny or something.
It was like some weird old lady who was like an old lady in the church who seems to be in love with the father and also loves the church so much. He had given the young girl at the beginning a special necklace from the church, and the old lady didn't agree with that. She thought the mom was a whore and all this other stuff. So it really is kind of thinly put together at the end. It's not, I don't think it's a great aha moment, except someone is murdered and they pull the mask off, or she pulls the mask off and it's this old lady and you're like, what the fuck?
I remember that. That is like, it's supposed to be an aha, but it's more like an aha, what the fuck?
Well, then you're like, well, like I gave it the aha and then I was like, but what was the reasoning again? And it's not really explicitly explained and it's not really strong, but it's interesting because they do one or two red herrings. And there's this weird fat guy character. He gets killed.
Creepy.
There's a couple really good stabbings, and it's like brutal. It's not excessive, but it's a really good movie. The killer, this little girl in the yellow rain slicker with this weird face mask. It's pretty scary. And the fact that you don't know who it is and it could be a kid. I mean, they're pointing towards a kid. They even point towards a cousin who's another kid for a while. It's pretty good. Good performances all around. Has a really good 70s, not slasher film, but thriller, I guess I would say, because it doesn't feel like a slasher. It feels more like a thriller.
Like a slasher. It doesn't even really feel like a horror film, but it is
more
creepy.
Suspense.
It's suspense and creepy and a mystery. Like, woo, it falls into me like American Galileo, you know, that Galileo sort of vibe, Italian horror film sort of.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that. And I guess a lot of 70s slashers and not slashers, I guess, again, but like thrillers and suspense
it's
kind of feel like that.
Because here's what makes it like proto slasher is there's somebody in a mask and a costume killing.
Sure.
Whereas like if it wasn't, it'd just be a murder movie, which would be like a mystery thriller. But like the reason it definitely falls into that proto slasher genre is because of mask knife and somebody's, you know.
See, and I'd almost say it's interesting. I'm thinking about slasher. Would you call Psycho, the original Psycho, a slasher?
No, but it's the original blueprint.
Fair. And I would agree with that. I feel like this is closer to Psycho than it is to what we now call a slasher.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the original slasher, but it was so out there that it didn't create. So like, you know, people give Halloween that credit to be the original slasher because it's a guy in a mask stabbing teenagers, and that created the blueprint that created the slasher craze and the genre. Okay. Leatherface is the first guy in a mask chopping people up for horror's sake. 74.
Here's a good question. Do you think a knife is essential for a slasher? Like, is a chainsaw too excessive of a weapon for it to be a slasher?
I mean, maybe that's why he didn't land slasher. But again, people didn't call Black Sabbath heavy metal.
Sure. I guess you're right.
They are the prototype of heavy
right.
metal.
Yeah, I guess if you're the first one, you're not called that, right? The second one is called that. Interesting. Exactly. Well, I think Alice Sweet Alice is more like Psycho because the kills kind of happen, or the kills and the maimings and stuff happen out of nowhere. Like they build towards it. You as the audience usually know something's going to happen, but there are a couple times where like out of nothing, this character comes out and starts stabbing, and that's what happens in Psycho. Whereas in Halloween and in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's like chase scenes where people are running, and I think that's a very important part of the slasher. So I kind of agree with you that Psycho is a blueprint. And yeah, you're right. I think this is a good way to frame this.
Think about this. They all come from Ed Gein. Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Psycho are all based on the real life serial killer Ed Gein. And he only killed like 2 or 3 people. I can't remember. I just read a book about it. I forgot. He didn't kill that many people, but he dug up a bunch of graves, fucked the bodies, and like fucking made skin suits out of them, and made creepy shit in his house. Like, holy shit, that's fucked up. And he has inspired, that whole thing, Psycho because he was obsessed with his mother and had her body, and then Texas Chainsaw Massacre for wearing the skins and all that shit. Right. Wild. But I think Halloween is the first one to do, hey, we're going to do this thing, guy in a mask stabbing teenagers, and everybody went, holy shit, we can do that. And it was the blueprint that created the genre.
I wouldn't debate that. I think that's right.
And again, like people say that like Black Christmas is a proto slasher, and it's like, yeah, but he's not stabbing anybody. He's like putting bags over their heads and stuff. Does he stab some people? I don't know. Like,
he stabs someone in the eye with the little unicorn thing, doesn't he?
Yeah, you're right.
That's on my. I'm like savoring that. I'm gonna watch that. I almost watch it. I pretty much watch it every year.
I can't wait to watch. I love Black Christmas. I can't wait to watch it. I want to get into Christmas movies. Can I briefly bring up, because I don't want to get too far away from it, Tales from the Crypt Demon Night?
Yeah, fuck yeah, you can.
That movie's so goddamn good, dude. So
that movie to me is almost like a budget Dusk Till Dawn. There's so many commonalities between the two, but I saw that in theaters. It's fan-fucking-tastic.
Great practical effects.
And it's such a fun movie. Talk about a fun 90s MTV movie.
Yes.
That's what that is, man. Go ahead. Give me your thoughts.
You have Billy Zane as this hot fucking demon. I mean, I'll give it to him.
The best character he's ever played. Billy Zane is this, and the movie starts, it's 2 cars chasing down the street, and one guy does a hard skid, and it's what's his name? Who's the bad guy from Die Hard 2?
It's the bad guy from Die Hard 2. What's his fucking name? Why can't I remember his name?
Good prepping.
Yeah, is it William Sadler? Yes, it is.
That sounds right.
William Sadler. He's in Shawshank Redemption. He's in The Mist. He's in Die Hard 2. He's Death in Bill and Ted's Journey. He's Death in the Bill and Ted movie. Yeah. Anyway, so he hard skids in the car, stands out with a shotgun, aiming at a car driving full speed at him. Boom, boom, boom. The car explodes into flames, almost knocks him over, and Billy Zane just walks out of the fire. And he's like, he is this smooth talking demon who's just hilarious. Like, I think he's really funny in the movie. And William Sadler runs to this shitty motel where all these people are holed up inside, and they all have like secret wants and desires. So when the demons show up, and he's like, I came to get something you stole from me. And he's like, well, I'm not going to give it to you. And the cops show up, and it's this whole thing. And they start assaulting the motel. And William Sadler has this vial with like blood in it, the blood of Christ. And he's like sealing off the doors with a magical barrier so the demons can't get in.
Which I think is such a cool idea.
Yeah. So then Billy Zane as a demon starts tempting people to like, betray your friends and I'll let you live. And every single person in it like has a different reason to maybe be betrayed or not or whatever. And it's super fun. It's super violent, really bloody, all these awesome practical effects, bunch of characters that you'll recognize. Jada Pinkett Smith's in it. And I just think it's so good. The demons are really cool.
They look fucking great. They all have like that backward edge stilt legs, like goat leg. Yeah. They look so fucking good.
It is an awesome movie. A bunch of, hey, that person. Oh, that person too. Mm-hmm. That guy's in it. I love it. I love it so much, dude. And it was super fun and just one of those movies I don't think got enough credit ever, because the Tales from the Crypt was never that good. Tales from the Crypt has a huge nostalgia factor for me. I love Tales from the Crypt, but like it was never that good. It never elevated to the point that you were like,
well, I think it was like the people
shit.
that loved it. It was a good cult show, almost
Yes.
like a cult movie, midnight movie, but a show.
But
I think
it had a budget. It was never that big budget. And to see
show?
it that level, to see it that level was fucking awesome.
But that's the thing. I think if you like the show, you're going to fucking love the movie. Bordello of Blood, which was the second Tales from the Crypt movie, I didn't think was as good. It was fine, but it wasn't as good. This movie is just like the show amped up a full letter grade. Like you said, the makeups are great. The practical effects are amazing. The violence and the action is really cool. Billy Zane's, there's a couple other characters. Jada Pinkett Smith plays a really cool, badass chick. There's a couple other characters that play Dick
Uncle
Miller.
Willie.
His fantasy is the best. Yeah. But he gets a bunch of topless chicks.
Willie, Uncle Willie.
But Billy Zane's character is like, where's the spinoff for that movie? He plays like a hick human, a demon in human form. And he just plays like this baller cowboy who's just fucking over the top on purpose. And he's the only one doing it. But it just sells it so well to like, what would a cocky ass demon who's never been beat act like, right?
He
and
doesn't give a fuck.
Tongue-in-cheek funny, right? He does such a great job.
He seems like a car salesman who wants to go home. Yeah, he literally is just like, I'm going to sell this car. I don't even care, but I'm running out of time, so we got to speed this up. Come on, baby. Let's make a sale. Like, he's fucking great. And
what did you say? William Sadler is the...
Yeah, William Sadler.
He does a great job, too, because he is almost always that guy, and he's almost always second or third in the cast. He's, one of the top 2 to 3 characters in this movie. He's the protagonist for pretty much the whole movie. He's the guy who knows what's going on. He's the guy that both to the other characters and to the audience explains to us what's happening. Yeah. I give him good action stuff. Like, he plays a badass in this, and he does it
with a shotgun and a vial of Christ's blood. Fucking awesome. And so then when they get into the meat and potatoes of what's happening, he has this big flashback where he was like, I was in World War I, and this guy grabbed me. He's like, I'm going to die, but the darkness is coming, and now you have to carry the torch. And it's like, this dude basically grabs him, and they have this mind meld transfer where he sees the blood of Christ collected in this vial. And if you are the owner, or if you are the protector of this thing, you will live forever. And then when you die, you have to put your blood in the vial, and it gives you the power to fight the demons and keep it going. And it's that's crazy. It's cool. And the way they show it is really cool. Like him going through history and time. And it's, what a
Isn't there a kid
movie.
in the hotel too who turns into a demon? They kill him?
Shitty little kid. Yeah. And they kill him. Yeah.
But he dies, right? He gets killed?
Yeah. Awesome practical monster.
Awesome.
Yeah. Kid gets fucked up. Yeah. It's full of good moments.
That's a fun movie. That's one of those movies. It's good to watch by yourself. It would probably be good to make jokes and stuff through, like Shitty Movie Sunday. But if you watched it with a bunch of people, you would just have more like, whoa, oh, that was awesome. More than making fun of it. You're not really going to make fun of it. You're just going to enjoy the shit out of it.
And it does a great job because it starts off with this bitchin' car explosion. And just when you're like, they better do something, a cop gets his face punched in.
That's right.
The fuck in. And I was like, they did a great job of just amping it up from there on out. From that point on, the movie's nonstop baller.
It's pretty much one of those movies that I just wish it was longer. If you said, Matt, you could change one thing about this, I would say make it 3 hours long. There's nothing else about it.
Where's the sequel where Jada Pinkett Smith is fighting more demons?
Sure.
They set it up that more demons are coming and Jada Pinkett Smith is here to fight demons now. Show me that. Give me more of that.
She gets on a bus, right? She seals the door of the bus.
And she seals the door. And the bus
tries to get on and he says, oh, I'll wait for the next one. And he just starts whistling the Tales of the Crypt theme, right?
Yep. And some different cowboy bad guy. Yeah. Awesome.
It's fucking cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of those movies that's why aren't more people talking about that?
It just got, I think it got skipped over because people were like, oh, Tales from the Crypt's that cheesy show on late night HBO. Yeah, it is. But they made a movie and it's fucking baller.
It's fucking great though. For what it is, it's great.
I love Tales from the Crypt. Come on. But I understand people are like, not my thing. Fine. If it didn't hit you when it did, I don't know if I could get into Tales from the Crypt now. Rewatching it, it's a little tough. But when I was a teenager and we had HBO, that was
especially
awesome.
The episodes with toplessness. You were like, oh yeah.
Yeah. It hit everything. It gave me nudity and horror movie stuff. Awesome. Thanks, Tales from the Crypt.
Some, I love those. There's some really good ones. It'd be interesting though, if I could somehow take my nostalgic glasses off and watch an episode, not remember what I watched it the first time as a kid, not remember the ambiance of the show, watching it as a 12-year-old, but just watch it straight now. Would I enjoy it or appreciate it as much? Or does the nostalgia make up a lot of that? I would think people like you and I probably like it more, even with that, because we appreciate that kind of shit to begin with.
Yeah. I tried to watch it with Kate. I tried to watch a couple episodes with Kate.
And she was not having it?
Yeah. It's a little too cheesy. It's a little too cheesy. And sometimes it's over the top. Sometimes they're awesome. And like, we watched maybe a season of it. And she was like, some of them were good. I'll give you some of them were cool. But a lot of it was really cheesy. And also like early HBO. So it didn't know how to meld things together well. And like, hey, we're a horror show. Hey, we're Skinamax. Let's have some late night boobies. And you're like, because like sometimes like you're literally watching, you're like, you only have a half hour to tell this story because you're going to tell like, how long were they? Like 45 minutes, 30 minutes?
I think they were 30 minutes. Maybe they were 45, but I don't think so. Again,
all for horror and nudity or whatever you're going to do. That makes it fun. But like they would like come to a screeching halt to have this happen. And you're like, yeah, but what about that monster? Like, this is great, but like, are we going to finish the like? You're messing up the flow of the story.
I love me some boobs, but at the same time,
yeah, they're like screech.
I get that.
Because they didn't know how to keep a story going.
You want to see monster boobs? That's your ultimate show right there.
Combine it together. This would be perfect.
You got to watch Mausoleum. Monster boobs with little monster faces on them.
Yeah. I saw it. I watched it when we talked about it.
So good.
Do you got any more movies?
Yeah, hit me with some Christmas. Christmas.
So we're getting into Christmas, and we're getting into Christmas movies, and we're getting, some of my favorite. I love Christmas movies, and probably my favorite Christmas movie is A Christmas Story. Mm-hmm. I think it's so good. Captures that magic of a child thing, and a great era. Has a very cringy scene that I wish wasn't there, but that's okay. The rest of it is fantastic.
Which one is cringy? The Chinese food scene?
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say when the kid gets murdered and gang raped, but no. That scene. No. There's a horribly cringy, the Chinese food scene that is not necessary. You can cut a piece of that out and it would have been fine, but whatever. Anyway, of its time, I suppose. But a new movie just came out called 8-Bit Christmas. Neil Patrick Harris, and it is, I think, unabashedly was like, we're just going to do A Christmas Story, but for 90s kids, 80s kids who wanted Nintendos. So instead of a Red Ryder BB gun, it's a Nintendo, and that is the premise of the movie, and they go from there. And we watched it with my mom over Thanksgiving, and I started out, like, not physically, but like in my mind, hands on my hip, being like, are you trying to be A Christmas Story right now? You think you're going to out Christmas Story a Christmas Story? Are you really this just blatantly going to rip this movie off? This movie that I love? You're just going to rip it off and use that formula? Fuck you, 8-Bit Christmas. And about halfway through, I'm like, okay, that's kind of clever. I see what you're going. And by the end, I was like, you guys did it. Good job. I love you.
Were you literally choked up? Because Christmas Story makes me cry almost every time I watch it.
I got choked up at the end. I got a little misty at the end. A little misty at the end. I wasn't like balling. It wasn't like Spider-Verse, but it was. I got a little misty, and I thought they did a great job, but it had a huge hill to climb, and it found its own footing. And they straight up are like, we're ripping off this movie. I think the movie knows right off the bat, we're just updating this for an audience that we think would appreciate it. And then finds its own footing, does its own thing well. And it's actually really funny and like had some good jokes, and at the end had a really nice poignant ending.
Wait, when is it from now?
Just came out like over Thanksgiving.
Streaming?
Yeah, it's on HBO Go, HBO Max or whatever.
HBO, some sort of HBO?
Yeah, and Neil Patrick Harris is in it, and like it has some really funny. So his daughter is like, "Dad, I want a phone so bad. I'll do anything to get a phone." He's like, "I wanted a Nintendo so bad," and they're at grandparents' house for Christmas, and he's like, "Let me show you the Nintendo," and they're playing, and she's like, "Oh man," and he's like, "Let me tell you about this." So he starts telling the story. He's like,
"Is it literally Nintendo, or is it like
Nintendo?" He's like. He's like, it wasn't just a gaming system; it was dubbed an entertainment system.
Nintendo entertainment system.
Lights are blasting out around. And it's this kid, and he's narrating it. He's like, and I had to ride my bike to school. And she's like, were you wearing a helmet? And it shows him not wearing a helmet. And he's like, yeah, I was wearing a helmet. Ding, and a helmet just appears on him. It's like, we always wear helmets. Like, his dad is one of those guys who always has a project going and never finishes the project. And he's like, well, how about you help me out, son? And it's basically a rehash of the help me change the tire scene. But
sure,
he's like, Dad, I really want to, he's trying to convince his parents independently to get him a Nintendo. And he's like, Dad, I need something that can help me strengthen my thumbs. And a Nintendo would do that. And then I can help you do woodworking stuff. And she's like, were you wearing eye goggles? And he's like, yeah. And they just appear on his face. They do a good. Steve Zahn is the dad. Steve Zahn is fun. He's fun.
That's a good dad character, I guess.
He's really fun. And he's funny too. I liked how they did it. And like, so then the town starts banning Nintendos because they're bad for kids. Like, they just do some funny stuff. There's one bit where one kid gets a Nintendo and they all have to like go to his house, but he's a piece of shit. He's like, all right, what'd you bring me? And the kids have to bribe him to go play the Nintendo. And he shows up with the Power Glove and everybody's like, fuck yeah. He goes, and that was the day he realized something that many of us would realize, that the Power Glove sucked. He like loses and he's so pissed that he drop kicks his TV and it falls on a dog and kills it. I was like, fucking dying. There's like
the Power Glove.
And like, it's full of these like funny beats. And like, again, full of the DNA from A Christmas Story. You know, in A Christmas Story, that kid who's like, I like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
I like
the Tin Man.
That's a character in the movie, but he's like there the whole time. They have a character who's like lies constantly, and they like everything he says isn't true, which is kind of funny. But then they have to figure out how to get a Nintendo. It's super fun.
And it said it's HBO?
HBO, yeah.
And it's current, so that they've now have now marred together the boobs and the comedy.
Yes,
in an acceptable way for you. It doesn't come to a screeching halt. Yeah. Does it come to a screeching halt? The boobs are integrated throughout the plot.
Throughout the plot, yeah.
8-bit boobs. I'd watch that.
No, it's a good movie. But I'm reading very bizarre reviews. People are like, "Who is this for?" The jokes are for children, but the nostalgia is like for adults. And I'm like, yeah, that's who it's for. It's for adults who have children.
Yeah, isn't that what most Christmas movies, at least in the last 15 years, are about?
A lot of people can't seem to understand the vibe, and they're like, it's just ripping off A Christmas Story. Yes, I think it knows it's doing that.
They're not trying to fool us.
Yeah, I think literally it's like A Christmas Story for a New Generation is literally the tagline for it. And okay, so if you think it's did you think they did a good job? There are a lot of movies that are ripoffs of other movies. Did they do a good job? Is it still entertaining? So I think it did a great job, but the reviews are all over the place where people don't seem to understand who it's for. People in their 30s and 40s with children. That's who it's for specifically. So
do you think the people writing those reviews are like a lot of Genesis players?
Yes. Like,
Sonic Forever! Baba Booey, Sonic Forever.
I'm a Sega Saturn guy. Like, oh, and then there's some asshole be like, PC Forever. He's like just playing with the big floppy disk, like click, click. While you were all playing Super Mario, I was playing Zork, okay? Word games, text-based adventures were the best.
My God.
Oh, ridiculous. So yeah, check that out, guys. Let me know what you think about that. I would like to hear other people's opinions. I think some people will probably be like, sucked, but I think some people will be like, you know what? Pretty good.
Same with some 90s movies, either the ones that we talked about today, if there's ones that you like, or the ones that we talked about, if you agree with us, if you disagree with us, things you did like or didn't like about them. We clearly did. We weren't doing an episode about 90s, even though we spent a lot of stuff. But what are some, I guess, suggest to Rumi, what are some 90s movies that you would suggest that are important to that decade or just fun? Yeah.
I'd love to hear what 90s movies are we missing. What were the gems that you thought were worth checking out? There's a lot of garbage, but I think there's some good ones in there too. Let us know. Social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at LaunchpadPod, and our website, launchpadpod.com, and then YouTube. Big shout out to new listeners. We've had an influx of new listeners, so we appreciate everyone who is sharing the word and spreading the good news of the Launchpad podcast. I hope you're taking us traveling, guys. We love to hear when people are like, I survived 4 hours in a car with my in-laws listening to the Launchpad podcast. I love hearing that. People who take us on long plane flights. while they're traveling over the holidays. That's always fun to hear.
That's roomy. I like the opposite. I like when you're like, you guys fuck my Christmas up because I played you in front of my in-laws. And my grandma was like, dildo pizza? What? Right? Your mother-in-law is like, I actually didn't like the Boondock Saints.
She's like, natural born killers. What a bunch of film school rejects. You should listen to watch some Truffaut and then come talk to me. She's shitting on your film choice.
God.
She's like, I bet you had a Scarface poster on your dorm room wall.
Yeah, let us know if we're fucking up your holidays.
Oh boy. Oh boy. All right, Remy, let's blast this thing off.
Before I make an old lady Black Christmas joke.
We're the Rocketeers and we're out.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5,